In this video, you will learn how to construct the centroid of a triangle. So the centroid is made up of the intersection of the medians of a triangle. So a median of a triangle connects a vertex to the opposite midpoint. So we got two things we have to find here. So we're going to have to find the midpoint, and then we're going to make a line from the vertex on the opposite of the side that you have the midpoint of. So this gives us the center of balance of a triangle. It is always going to be inside the triangle since we are using medians. So to create a centroid, we're going to get out our compass and our ruler. So to create our first median, we need to find the midpoint. So to find the midpoint, you use the construction for a perpendicular bisector. So the same way you would do a perpendicular bisector, that's the same way you're going to find the midpoint. So to start that, we're going to put our compass, the point of the compass, on one of the vertices of the triangle. And to make a perpendicular bisector, to find the midpoint, we want to go over halfway across that segment. So I'm going to create my arcs above and below that line. And then I switch to the other vertex on that side, the other end point of that segment, and create the arc. So notice how close my arcs are. That means that I was barely over halfway. So just to clean it up, since I'm going to have a lot of midpoints, I'm going to take away some of the extra pieces of this construction so that I have those intersections of my arcs, but I don't need this extra part of the circle. I'm also going to take away the middle so that when I make my midpoint, I'm only going to see the midpoint. So to get that midpoint, I line up my straight edge with those intersections of the arcs, and the midpoint is going to be the point on that line where it crosses the side. So this right here is the midpoint of that side. So for my next one, I want to make sure that I go a little bit further over halfway so that I can really see where those intersections are going to cross. So now let's do our next side. So if I'm using this vertical side over here, I want to put the compass, the point of the compass, on one of the vertices. And I want to make sure that I'm over halfway, so I'm going to go a little bit further this time so that my arcs aren't so close together. So I'm going to create my arc above and below that side. Once I get it, I'm going to go to the other endpoint, and I'll create that arc that will cross it. I'm going to clean it up a little bit so that I don't have quite as many things going on when I look at constructing these medians. So right now I'm just going through finding the midpoint of each side. I'm going to take out the middle so that all I see in the middle is that midpoint. So to find the midpoint, I line up my straight edge with the intersection of those two arcs. And I'm going to mark the point where it intersects that side. All right, so there's my midpoint of that side. So let's find the midpoint of our last side. So I put my compass on one of the endpoints of my segment that I'm looking at. I'm going to look at this side. This is a long side. So I'm going to make sure my compass is over halfway. Create that arc. The longer the distance, the bigger the arc's going to be. Move my compass to the other endpoint and create my arc that's going to cross it. All right, clean it up so that I don't have quite as many lines going on, so that whenever I go to create my medians, I'll be able to focus on what I'm looking for. All right, so to find that midpoint, I'm going to line up these two intersections with my straight edge. And I'm going to mark that point where it crosses the side of the triangle. All right, so I've got my midpoints. Now to find that centroid, I'm looking for the medians. So I had to make my midpoints, and now I can figure out where my medians are. So to do this, since I have my midpoints, I know how I constructed them. I'm just going to take away these extra markings that are inside my triangle so that they don't get in the way of my medians. And to create a median, I connect the midpoint of a side to the opposite vertex. So first, let's work with this midpoint that has the blue marking. And the blue marking is across from this vertex up here. So I want to line up my straight edge with that midpoint and the opposite vertex. So I make sure I have it lined up to where I can see both of them. Then I'm going to draw that straight line from the vertex to the midpoint along that straight edge. All right, so this is my first median. It goes from vertex to opposite midpoint. So now let's create that median line that goes to the green vertex. So line up your midpoint with the opposite vertex and draw that straight line along your straight edge. So there's my next median. I can kind of see where they need to cross at. So for the last one, line up that opposite vertex to the midpoint. Make sure you've got your straight edge lined up real well. And then draw your line. So notice that these three lines cross at that point in the middle, and that point in the middle is called the centroid. So the centroid is the center of balance of a triangle.